Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to join me today. We're talking about next-gen networks. So I want to talk about why those are important to businesses, especially businesses of cryptocurrency. I want to share with you a few case studies, including our own path to the cloud and the networking solution required to get there. And then I'll also share some of my thoughts and some questions you can help to evaluate your own business and any potential partners you hire to help implement your own next-gen network. But firstly, let's take it back just a little bit. Let's define what a network is and why it's important to a business, just to be clear what we're talking about. And then we can kind of talk about the differences between what we would call a traditional and next-gen network. The marketing team has told me, made me swear to keep it out of the weeds, so I'll do my best not to make it too technical, but I don't promise a whole lot. So people often underestimate the importance of good network infrastructure. It's in fact the baseline technology organizations need for their business to run smoothly. It can consist of really obvious things like internet connectivity, firewall switches, wireless, but it includes things like the physical wiring in the walls. It can include data centers, intrusion protection and detection systems, web filtering, and a list of other security tools. It can even include your cell phone, right? Cloud applications like Office 365 or Azure or AWS. It includes employees' home networks. It includes coffee shops, wherever your people are working. A network touches every part of a business, and its borders often extends much further beyond the company walls. And this has been, obviously driven by a growing demand for remote workforce, companies building more and more distributed office spaces, applications migrating to the cloud, and it's made it really difficult for IT professionals to keep up. They both have to implement these complex systems and do it in a secure and robust way. So how's that different from a next-gen firewall then? A next-gen network is exactly all the same components, but it works to implement them all in a really seamless way. So it focuses on intelligent solutioning, application-aware systems, identity management, finding cost-effective connectivity options. It prioritizes data streams. It relies on cybersecurity. It reduces manpower. It does all these things in a very kind of cohesive way. And it most commonly starts with a next-gen firewall. And I'm going to use the next-gen firewall versus traditional firewall to kind of help demonstrate the differences here. And I found actually that Fortinet, they've got a really great infographic up on the next slide that I think helps articulate it. And I'll run through some of the key points here. So again, one step back, what's a firewall do? It's not just the buzzword in movies, right? Every movie says, we've broken through 15 firewalls to get to wherever we're trying to get. And that's generally, maybe it's a little bit right, but it's mostly wrong. Traditional firewalls describe really just devices that control the traffic that's allowed to enter or exit a network. And they came in two flavors traditionally, right? They were stateful and stateless. Stateless firewalls, they check over every single ounce of information that runs through a network, and they're just not intelligent, right? They allow in and allow out based on a certain set of rules. Stateful firewalls, right, kind of the next evolution, they began to track traffic flow and are able to keep track of where the information is flowing in and out of. Obviously, a firewall that's able to track that level of information is more effective, but it still left things a little short. They were limited in the depth of inspection of the data that they can go. They were not sophisticated at all and often required additional tools or applications or appliances to run securely. So that's where the next generation firewall kind of came into play. It's a term used by a lot of vendors, and the specifics obviously can change from vendor to vendor. But generally speaking, there's a couple features that they all include. They should, as I mentioned before, right? They should be application aware, which I think is one of the biggest differences between traditional and next-gen firewalls. Traditional firewalls relied on very well-defined ports and rules to determine whether traffic can come in and out of a network. Now, next-gen firewalls, they're capable of seeing inside the network, right? They know exactly what application is running on that network traffic, and can allow, based on that, it was critical to combat hackers, right? As hackers improved their tools and their methods to get inside of a network, the good guys had to become more sophisticated as well, and this was a big step towards that. Next-gen firewalls should include identity awareness, right? They should have the ability to track identity, the traffic by both the device that it came from and the user authorized to use it. This way you control not only the type of traffic that comes in and out of the network, but who's allowed to use it. Of course, next-gen firewalls still use stateful packet inspection, but it goes a lot deeper, right? If you're familiar with the OSI model, great, right? Traditional firewalls were good between layer 2 and layer 4. The next-gen firewalls take it all the way to layer 7, which is at the application level. Additionally, they should include intrusion protection and intrusion detection systems, right? Like I said before, right, these used to be systems that had to be deployed separately from your firewall. They're sometimes difficult to implement, could be costly, often an ineffective solution. With next-gen firewalls, the intrusion detection and protection are features that are built right into the platform, right? They're there and available immediately from when you install the product. And the last big feature that I think is important to understand the difference between next-gen firewalls and really next-gen networks is the intelligence that it brings to the table. They should be able to obviously collect their own intelligence and make decisions, but they should be able to connect to external resources, right? They should be able to connect to global repositories of heuristics and other threat fingerprints that the IT community as a whole can contribute to. So we all end up battling, cyber threats together rather than trying to solve it alone. So there's tons, right? The firewall, right? That's one component of the next-gen network, and there are tons of additional components we could talk about. But it's a place where most people get started, and it's a place where we can really articulate the differences. So I'll let you go do some of your own due diligence on additional components, but let's talk about some of the indicators that it may be time for you to be thinking about a next-gen network. And they generally fall into 4 buckets I found. And we'll start with the easy one here, like equipment lifecycle. And all that means is, you buy a set of hardware, and that hardware has a certain lifespan, right? Generally, servers last 4 or 5 years, networking devices 4 or 5 years, computers 3 or 4, so on and so forth. So at some point, every network will have to get replaced. It's just inevitable. It's going to have to happen. And so this opportunity is, the most convenient time to really think about implementing the latest and greatest technology. And so what we found here, at least in the Midwest, is a lot of companies pushed off the network upgrade because they don't understand it's important, right? And it was easy to push off, right? And it was really back in 2008 that this started happening. And the result of that now is a lot of organizations are playing catch up. They're paying off the IT debt that they've accumulated since 2008 and not maintaining that cycle. The good news is that a lot of companies still running these old firewalls and switch solutions and internet services are running on contracts or service plans that are just expensive. New technology drives costs down all the time. And so, I've switched a client to a next-gen network by looking at their internet connectivity and their firewall solutions and their maintenance and upkeep. And I saved, this company had 12 sites, so they were a pretty large group, but they saved almost $30,000 a year because no one had reviewed these systems or the contracts in years. So that's real money that we saved them, that they're able now to take that and reinvest into things that are valuable to running their business. Really that's why we more often than not, when we take on a new client or assess a client, or we always start with the network. It's one of the most impactful places that we can make a difference quickly. And obviously it's the foundation of your technology stack. Think of it like the foundation of your house. You wouldn't install a second floor on a crumbling foundation. The second floor being, could be a cloud application that you want to move to, like Office 365 or Dynamics CRM or any other critical business software. It could be deploying a remote workforce. It could be installing a new disaster recovery system or mitigating cybersecurity threats. All these are high value things that you would want to implement for your organization that would not work well if the foundation wasn't there. So the next big bucket of indicators would be application and cloud migrations. If you're venturing into the world of cloud, awesome. If you're pushing your business to be bleeding edge in technology, great. But stop and ask, can your offices even connect to them? I've had a client that was running some traditional MPLS networks with a bunch of T1s. They had about 10 offices or so, and they were trying to get to the cloud. They wanted to be there. They had all these plans to get there, but they struggled massively with performance problems, and they just assumed that it was the cloud. Right, the cloud is bad because it was performing bad. And when we got in to help, it was obvious for us, right? The network just wasn't built to handle what they were trying to do. Compare it to merging on I-465 using a donkey path, right? It's just not going to work. Really, applications should be able to live anywhere at this point, and your network should be able to accommodate that. The third big bucket, security risk. Obviously, security in the cybersecurity landscape, it changes every single day. You've likely been spearphished. You've likely dealt with ransomware in the past couple years. That landscape continuously evolves. So should the network. It should absolutely include the intrusion protection and detection that we talked about earlier. You should know what's coming in and out of your business in a very intelligent way. The last big bucket is business growth, and this one's kind of a positive one, at least, right? The economy is doing really well, which is good for our businesses, which means, right, you're probably adding more office space, or maybe you're remodeling, maybe you're pushing into new technology that you've been thinking about. Technology obviously can become a differentiator for you as an organization. Maybe you're just trying to attract the best talent. Running a next-gen network can enable your people and the potential people you hire to work remotely, access the latest systems, and do it securely and seamlessly to how they live. Employees expect technology to work at this point, and when it doesn't, they'll leave. They'll find somewhere where it does. Especially with the job pool being as tight as it is these days, it can be a big factor for whether they choose to work. So again, the message here, right, is the way people want to work has shifted. It's not is shifting, it has shifted, and organizations have to shift with them. So let's talk about KSM Consulting's kind of case study here, our trip to the cloud. Before I jump in, though, are there any questions around next-gen firewalls or networking or any of the topics we've talked about so far?
If you do have questions, please feel free to type them in the box on the right-hand side of the screen. We can take a look at those now, and if we don't get to that right now, we will definitely at the end of the call. So one that did come in, Ryan, is what makes Fortinet the right solution?
So Fortinet, the reason I used their infographic earlier, because we do believe in the Fortinet product from a next-gen firewall standpoint. For us, it ties to our case study a little bit, where we were kind of first, or not first, I don't want to say first, but we were very early to market with the Microsoft Azure product, and many of our clients have distributed offices, and to get them all to connect seamlessly to Azure, as we started thinking about how to move workloads there, Fortinet was kind of one of the first to market in the Azure platform. We tried traditional Cisco solutions at the time, and they worked, right? You can make it work, but it was a little overly complex and hard to manage. Fortinet made it really simple for us to get connected to us specifically, and our clients to get connected to the Azure product. So, good question. Anything else? All right. Well, let's jump into our case study then. Several years ago, obviously, we came to the same crossroads that many of you all do, and had to make the decision to move to the cloud or not. For lots of reasons. It made sense for us to shift. We had ISP, our internet connectivity contracts were up for renewal. As a technology provider ourselves, we wanted to continue to improve our security posture. We were adding additional office spaces, downtown office and Colorado office. We wanted to improve business continuity. What happens in the case of a disaster? How do our people continue to work? We wanted to minimize the manpower required to support all the systems. We wanted to avoid all the big upfront costs that come with hardware refreshes. And we were running old gear, old Cisco gear. So if you go back and look at that factor slide, when we had all the major indicators actually of telling us to shift to the cloud and implement a next-gen network. And it may help to hear a little bit about where we came from, I guess. We used to run with the expensive T1s, Cisco firewalls, Cisco switching, wireless, on-site servers, just like everyone else. And honestly, if that sounds familiar, you should call us. We can help build a plan for you to get out of that cycle. But we evaluate and implement solutions for our clients all the time. It really wasn't a surprise for us when it came up for renewal for us that we had to do the same thing that we do for our clients. We installed high-speed SLA'd circuits from reputable internet provider. We got rid of the old T1s. We built, we added secondary, cheap broadband circuits in for failover. We shifted as many applications to software as a service products as we could. We evaluated our entire application portfolio and figured out what made sense and shifted them. What didn't make sense, we shifted to infrastructure as a service where it made sense. And so if stuff didn't make sense as a SaaS product, we at least put it in a cloud solution. We even kept some of the solutions on-prem, right? The ones that didn't make sense, that weren't viable to move yet. And we have a plan for those, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. That's kind of the beauty of a good network. We upgraded our traditional kind of Cisco firewalls to the next gen firewall with the FortiGate, right? Installing IDS and IPS, and then we installed identity-based wireless, again just to help improve our security posture. And I summed all that up in 6 or 7 bullets, but don't let me fool you. I mean, that took months of planning and execution. But a good IT department is planning for that, right? They should have a roadmap for these kinds of decisions and how to predict what's going to come up next. I think on the next slide here, we listed some solutions that should be kind of considered when you're talking about next-gen networks and cloud solutioning, right? Because our way isn't the only way. There's many ways to get to the cloud. There's many ways to implement a network. It absolutely depends on what your company's specific needs are. And so we listed out a few for you to think about. When you're thinking about these solutions, you need to think about a good data center, right? It can be, pure cloud data center like Azure. It could be, some of our local carriers like, Lightbound and Expedient, all do really great jobs. Firewalls, right? From a next-gen standpoint, I think Fortinet's probably at the top of its game, but Barracuda and SonicWall also have really great products that you should consider. There's a lot of great internet connectivity in town. And there's, from a switching standpoint, right? Cisco, HP, Fortinet all have really good products. So you really got to kind of dig into what's valuable to you, what's important to you in building these networks, and then find a partner that, find a group of partners, I guess, that fit your needs. We tend to take a very agnostic approach to our solution design. So we mixed and matched based on the best fit for us in each one of the categories. We have a few other case studies that we can chit-chat about as well. I think the first one is a property management organization. I think this one's interesting because it really kind of articulates the distributed network. They had a massively dispersed workforce, right? The majority of their people worked remotely. They needed to incorporate networks into their building design, into the management. They used technology as a differentiator for how they were building these buildings. They didn't have a lot of cost control. They didn't have the ability to manage these systems remotely, and they were faced with some new compliance challenges. So, we stepped in, and they wanted to take a cloud-first approach. We agreed. We helped evaluate all their systems and said it made a lot of sense. And then we needed a next-gen network to get them to connect to those systems, right? Their solution, right? They moved their workloads into Azure and Office 365. They moved from traditional file servers to Box for doc management. The Fortinet security platform allowed for them to solve their compliance challenges. And Barracuda Essentials helped to solve some of the security challenges on their collaboration platform. Ultimately, right now, right, they have a completely compliant, 100% cloud infrastructure. Right, they have a very mobile workforce. It's easy to support remotely. They have predictable costs when they're building these solutions now, and have helped them to grow their business much quicker than they were able to before. A second pretty interesting case study for us was we had a large distribution center client. Again, came to us with some PCI compliance challenges in this case. They had really old hardware, right? The big indicator, the hardware cycle for them was approaching 15 years, I think. I mean, they've been running the same stuff for a while. Obviously, it made it very difficult to manage and was not very reliable. For them, they weren't quite ready to make that all cloud, all or nothing shift. And that's okay, right? We help them get installed with a hybrid cloud solution, right? Again, running on and I add the word resilient next-gen network in here because they valued the resiliency in allowing multiple internet connections to come into these solutions and provide backup for each one of their sites. Again, they used the Fortinet security fabric. They used HP switching in this case that aligned with their existing technology. It allowed them to get to Office 365. It allowed them to start shifting their ERP to the cloud. And from a costing standpoint, right, they have 10 times the internet speed at the exact same cost that they were paying before. So again, another kind of big win for next-gen networks here. If any of those scenarios sound familiar to you, obviously, it's common. You aren't alone. It is hard, but you can find yourself a really great partner in town to help you. You should be asking, things like, what's your cloud strategy, and are you spending a ton of money on legacy systems? Because if you are, right, you need to be reaching out to get help, right? That you don't have to suffer in silence. What else do we have here? On our next slide here, how do you take the first step to finding a partner or knowing if you need to find a partner? We've built kind of a quick checklist for you to help decide if you should be upgrading to a next-gen network and how to evaluate some potential partners. It's either going to come later today or maybe tomorrow. I think maybe tomorrow. So take a look at it. Fill out some of the questions. If you think it makes sense for you, then it probably does. So if you get to that point and you think you're ready for a next-gen network, like I said, partnering with someone or multiple someones is really the best way to get moving on it. The skills required to build a next-gen network are hard to find and often expensive. Whoever you pick should be asking a lot of questions about your business before they ever get to solution design. Don't let someone come in and just push a solution down your throat. They should really take the time to understand the applications that you're running, what you're trying to accomplish as a business, and the current technology you run. Often we find that IT staff have some of the tools that they need. They're just underutilized. So finding a good partner that'll take the time to take all those things into consideration is important. To recap kind of today, I'll let everybody get back to their afternoon. I'll leave you with one, the network for your organization is the baseline for your technology. Leaving this webinar, you should be asking yourself, when was the last time you evaluated your network, and do you have a plan forward? Second, think about the big indicators. If you're considering an upgrade, or consider an upgrade if you're on the verge of hardware refresh or business growth or shifting to the cloud or looking just to improve your security posture. And third, make sure you're talking to the right partner, right? Ask the right questions before you start building a network solution. You'll find yourself down an expensive rabbit hole if not. So now I guess I'll open it back up to any other questions that may have popped up. staff.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ryan, so much. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to type them in on the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. If not, Ryan's contact information will be available so we can follow up with any questions that you have for him. One that did come through is, why did you align behind Fortinet?
I kind of answered that one earlier on. Really because it was kind of first to market with Azure. What we also liked about just Fortinet as an organization, they have a lot of great products. It allowed our clients to really kind of step into network transformation and cloud transformation rather than having to kind of rip and replace everything all at once. They had a very similar approach to how we handled solution design, where you can layer these solutions together and build on top of them rather than having to rip everything out.
Okay, great. Another question that came in is, how long does it take to upgrade your network?
So that's a really tough question. So I mean, it depends on the organization. It depends on what you have. If you've got a solid foundation, right, you can add features and functionality on, really quickly. I mean, just a couple weeks. If you're, really behind and you've got a lot of that IT debt we talked about to pay off, it can take up to a year sometimes. A lot of that actually depends on the internet connectivity. To be honest with you, internet connectivity shifts can take anywhere between 90 and 120 days on average, and I've seen them take 6 months before.
We do have another question that came in. We've got time to answer that. Are there any guidelines for determining the amount of internet speed needed to transition to the cloud?
Good question. So a lot of that, really depends on what you're connecting to. So, are there any guidelines for determining the amount of internet speed needed to transition to the cloud? So there are tools for sure that you can run on your existing systems that will they'll spit out how much memory, how much processor, how much network bandwidth is consumed, and where they talk to. So we often will run those tools before we shift organizations to the cloud to make sure we're trying to predict as best we can. It also depends on how many cloud applications you're running. Right, so if you have a strong presence in the cloud already, you need a lot more bandwidth to accommodate all those connections. Traditionally, right, if you have a lot of applications still internal, right, you connect to those. The majority of your people generally connect to those applications kind of locally. So I hate to give an ambiguous answer, but it just kind of depends. But there's definitely tools you can run on your systems that will tell you how much bandwidth you're consuming and where it's going and what kind of applications are running on it.